Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I'm David Pendergrass. Something that has really hit me hard the other day again was listening to the various discussions, the news stations and whatnot, and Today's Show, NBC, whatever, when they're talking about the political landscape. Something that's very common to say are things like, why don't we can just ignore our differences and focus on the main thing? It also comes out when we hear tragedies of people dying or shooting police officers shooting someone else or whatever. This ignoring our differences. Why we can't get over our differences and just focus on God or focusing on love? That's a big one. Let's just focus on love or whatever it is. Just quick reflections. One is, I understand the need to have a person stop murdering people. I mean, that's a good thing to have someone stop murdering. Of course, right? That's a good thing, so please stop. The problem is, this isn't the mature way to do it. It reminds me of when people say that there's no difference between man and female. Male and female, we just should not focus on those differences. And we're just all humans. Well, this kind of stuff is just silly. Let me call the obvious, but this is silly. There are differences between a man and a woman. They're different. Their brains are a little bit different. Their brain chemistry can be different. It doesn't mean they're inferior. They're different. I mean, we have two different sexes. Though I guess this might be debated. It's not debatable to me. I think they're two different sexes. But it is the same thing when it comes to anyone else's worldview. The problem with saying let's just ignore our differences and just focus on love is, who gets to define what love means? This is where people get ticked off. David, we all know what love means. This is just stupid. This is just cerebral, political, abstract, blah, blah, academic nonsense. But to me, it sure is not. Because the way the New Testament defines love, to care for one's good, regardless of whether or not they're their enemy, regardless of whether or not they are someone you have been trained to hate, regardless if they persecute you, that's different from what I experience as the definition of love in America. In America, these days, love means tolerate, get along with. That is not the biblical definition. Now, that matters because that's a worldview distinction. Rather, it's part of a distinct worldview. So I can ignore our differences all we want. At some point, the issue is, how do we define what our goal is? And this is where Christians get made fun of and sometimes even hurt, is when we say, well, I do love you, which is why I'm telling you the truth. But when a pagan says that, when a non-Christian says that, what they really mean is, you're just a bigot. You're closed-minded. You're trying to shove your beliefs down my throat, and to which the Christian might say, no, it's because I love you. And they say, no, you're not being loving at all. Because if you love me, you would let me believe what I want to believe. You would not try to change my view. A similar thing is in politics. We should just ignore our differences and focus on one country. We do have differences. We have differences of opinion. Not on everything, but people do. I mean, even the two major parties, the Democrat and Republican, there are a lot of things they have in common. America's the best. Let's defend America. Let's help poor people not be poor. Let's help the middle class be even richer, and so forth, so on. They might say it. I'm not sure everyone believes it, but the point is, people say the same thing. But there are distinct differences about exactly which strategy accomplishes the goal as they understand it based on the Constitution's framework. Now, the point is, at every step of the way, we are disagreeing to some degree because we have to define what the original goals were, what the Founding Fathers' goals were, and do we have to adapt what their goals were, what the Constitution's goals are and were, what America's goals are and were, and what the strategy is to get there. We're going to disagree. So it is such a trite, senseless thing to say, let's just overlook our differences. I see this in churches as well. There are different views on things. What's staggering to me is that the people who are the most adamant about being the most welcoming are typically the most hateful if you disagree with them. It's just, I've experienced this, and I'm not alone. This is a common thing that happens in society, and it happens in churches. So to be truly welcoming means I have to welcome someone who disagrees with my view. But therein lies the rub. In the New Testament, one of the number one features of the early church that to which Paul called them was a unity. Unity. And oftentimes the translation says unity in spirit. That's fine. The Greek, it might be one-minded, one thinking, one thought. And typically he means one thought toward the goal of the gospel. What it'd been cool to know is if we had interviewed Paul and said, Paul, what about the strategy? Do we have to agree on the strategy, how to make disciples? Do we have to agree on the strategy? Do we have to agree on this? Do we have to agree on that? And so we have one extreme of churches that divide or literally do this. I've known people who've come from churches whose churches have split over the color of the carpet. I've known churches who have died off because of who did or did not get credit for a room that was painted or some plaque on the wall or who used it one time, and they broke off and the church died off. Now, when it comes to things like that have nothing to do with the major mission or goal of any church, which should be make disciples, then I would say, sure, these are quote-unquote differences that should be overlooked. When it comes to the goal of the church, the goals of the church, not the strategies, we can't be divided. We have to be unified. And that works with any organization. And I would argue that it works for our country, but that's a different issue because I'm mainly concerned about what the church does, not what the country does. So I encourage you, when you're talking in conversation with people, if they can just say something like, well, what's your problem? Why can't you let's look at our differences and all get along? Seems to me a proper, healthy, mature response is, the reason why is because we don't all agree. And the best, healthy approach is not to deny that we disagree. Rather, it is to talk cordially and kindly, and if we're Christians, like Jesus, one to another. In kindness, in gentleness, I mean real gentleness, we can see it a different way. We can see it a different way in kindness and gentleness. So instead of overlooking our differences, which is living in denial and putting our head in the sand, let's look at if there are similarities and if there are differences and to discuss them together. Then at the end of it all, ask the question, is this worth dividing over? Should this issue make us break bread, break table fellowship? If it is, it's got to be a biggie, a massive. In the New Testament, it seems to me that the two major issues that cause a person to break bread, to cause division, and when it was supported, was on theological issues or moral issues. Whenever Paul found out someone was trying to change the gospel that Jesus is all you need, he very much encouraged them to get away from those teachers or to shut them up and get them to stop, because that would cause massive division of the gospel. The other issue is moral issues. The church these days, we don't like to talk about that because people scream out, oh, you're a legalist, you're all about rules. The New Testament sure is not legalistic. It says that how we live in holiness is a really, really big deal. Paul said to the church at Corinth, kick the guy out who's sleeping with his stepmom in 1 Corinthians 5. I could give several other examples where moral issues are real big deals. Of course, in 1 Corinthians 5, one of the chief problems is that the congregation was supporting it. So it was causing influence on the congregation. Nevertheless, there are only those two major kinds of issues that should cause persons to be clear that they have differences on theology and morality. And of course, then what do? We go back to the original text, the New Testament, and we go back there as a primary ground zero, and then work out of that our interpretations. But we can do so in gentleness and kindness. So together, we don't have to overlook our differences and just focus on love, because like I said, we have to focus, well, who gets to define what love means? Well, let's just focus on God. Well, who defines what God means? A Buddhist? There are some Buddhists who are not atheists, so that's really weird. They should be atheist. Hindus and Jews and Muslims and Christians and whatever, they have, and Navajo Indians, whatever, we have different views of God. So if you say, well, just focus on God, what does that mean? Is it Oprah's universe? Is it the life force? Is it chi? Is it... The point is, at some point, you've got to pick sides. You've got to say, here's how I understand it. And as soon as you say, here's how I understand it, you have alienated billions of other people, which means you have what? A difference. Well, just because I have a difference doesn't mean I want to kill you. Even within the church, my final encouragement, I'm just repeating this, even within the church, we ought to work really hard to have differences to say, you know what, I hear you saying this, and I hear your reasons. Do I understand that correctly? And until they say, yes, you understand me correctly, then you can say, okay, well, I don't see it that way, and here's why. I still love you, I care for you, but we just see that differently. Now, if what we disagree upon is the gospel itself, and or we're okaying sins, oh, that's good, it's good to do those sins. Well, those are bigger issues. We're going to say we disagree, but we can still do it in kindness. So let's don't overlook differences. Let's actually support them and keep loving each other. God bless you. See you next time. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want more, go to davidpendergrass.com, davidpendergrass.com. If you look at the top, you'll see various tabs that have sermons I've preached, a link to all the podcasts I've done so far, a link to my consulting website. For more information about my consulting, see davidpendergrassconsulting.com. Also, you'll see information about the books I've written that are found on amazon.com. So davidpendergrass.com, one-stop shop, all that you need. If you want to reach out to me, follow me on Twitter at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass, and send me a message. I'll see you online. I gotta run and tell about what the Lord has done for me.